Marcus laughed scornfully as Eleanor cried on the floor. "Nobody's going to help you," he said. Carmen Rivera, the new cleaner, dropped her bucket. What she did next froze the billionaire's smile forever. "Before we start today's story, tell me where you're watching from, grab a coffee or get comfortable on the couch, and please don't forget to support us. You just need to hit the like button, and I'll know you enjoy this type of story. Ready? Let's begin." The steel mansion stood as a monument to power in the city's most exclusive neighborhood. Behind the gilded gates and immaculate gardens, however, lay a reality few dared to question. Marcus Steele, at 52, had built a financial empire based on intimidation and cruelty, characteristics he didn't leave at the front door. Eleanor, his wife of only 28, walked the mansion's corridors like a ghost. 6 months pregnant, she carried in her trembling hands a cup of tea he had demanded. Her thin arms showed purple marks poorly disguised by makeup, and her eyes, once bright, now reflected only fear and resignation. "Where's my tea?" Marcus's voice echoed through the study before she even entered. "It's here," Eleanor murmured, placing the cup on the mahogany desk without daring to look up. "It's cold," he said after a sip, even though steam still rose from the cup. "You can't even do that right." Pristine Cleaners had sent a new employee that morning. Carmen Rivera, 45, a single mother of 2 teenagers, observed everything in silence as she organized her cleaning supplies in the entrance hall. Unlike the other employees who had worked in the house, she didn't lower her eyes when Marcus passed. There was something in her gaze that bothered the billionaire, a complete absence of intimidation. "You're the new cleaner?" he asked, stopping before her with his usual authoritative stance. "Yes, sir, Carmen Rivera," she replied, maintaining eye contact. Marcus expected her to lower her head, as everyone did. He expected to see the familiar fear in her eyes. Instead, he found a disconcerting serenity. "The rules here are simple," he said, stepping closer. "You clean, you stay quiet, and you don't get involved where you're not called. Understand?" "I understand perfectly," Carmen replied, showing no reaction to his threatening tone. That afternoon, while cleaning the upper floor, she heard screams coming from the master bedroom. They weren't shouts of argument, they were cries of pain. Carmen stopped what she was doing and walked towards the sound. Through the slightly ajar door, she saw Eleanor huddled on the floor, protecting her belly with her hands, while Marcus gesticulated violently above her. "You embarrassed me in front of the investors yesterday," he yelled. "Your defeated look, your pathetic answers, your dead weight in this family." The other employees working in the house, 2 housekeepers and a gardener, walked past the corridor as if nothing were happening. It was the unwritten rule: see, hear, and keep quiet. Everyone needed the job, and everyone knew Marcus wouldn't hesitate to ruin the life of anyone who crossed him. Carmen, however, had never been good at following rules that hurt her conscience. Raised by a grandmother who taught her that money never justifies cowardice, she carried within her a strength that came from years of fighting alone to support her family. She had faced abusive bosses, exploitative landlords, and prejudiced neighbors. A spoiled billionaire would be no different. When Marcus raised his hand to deliver another blow to Eleanor, Carmen pushed the door wide open. "Excuse me for interrupting," she said, entering the room as if she had been invited. "I need to clean in here." Marcus turned, surprised and furious. "I told you not to get involved where you're not called." "And I said I understood your rules perfectly," Carmen replied calmly, helping Eleanor to her feet. "But I didn't say I agreed with them." The silence in the room was deafening. Marcus looked at Carmen as if she were an apparition. No one had ever interrupted one of his conversations with Eleanor, much less a simple employee. His face turned red with rage as he processed what had just happened. "You're fired," he said through clenched teeth. "Grab your things and get out of my sight before I call security." Carmen continued helping Eleanor sit on the bed, checking if she was hurt. "Are you all right?" she asked softly, completely ignoring her boss's threats. "I said you're fired," Marcus yelled, taking a step towards them. It was then that Carmen turned to face him. There was something in her eyes. It wasn't fear, it wasn't defiance. It was a cold determination that made Marcus hesitate for a moment. "I heard you, sir," she said, her voice maintaining a respectful but firm tone. "But before I leave, I need to finish my work." "What work?" he asked, confused and even more irritated. Carmen went to the adjacent bathroom and returned with a damp cloth. Carefully, she began to clean Eleanor's face, which had a red mark on her cheek. "This work," she said simply, "caring for people." Marcus was used to being feared, obeyed and respected through intimidation. Carmen's serenity completely unnerved him. He didn't know how to react to someone who showed neither fear nor interest in his money. "You have no idea who I am," he said, trying to regain control of the situation. "I know exactly who you are, sir," Carmen replied, still tending to Eleanor. "A man who hits pregnant women. I know plenty like you in my neighborhood. The only difference is they don't wear a suit." The comparison was like a slap in Marcus's face. He prided himself on his sophistication, his elevated social position. To be compared to anyone from the neighborhood was intolerable. "I can ruin your life," he threatened. "I can make sure you never get a job in this city again." Carmen finally turned to him again. "Mr. Marcus," she said, using a tone a mother would use with a petulant child, "you can fire me. You can try to harm me. You can do whatever you want. But while I'm here, I won't pretend I don't see what's happening." Eleanor, who had remained silent throughout the exchange, finally spoke, her voice a weak whisper. "Please don't fire her because of me." It was the first time in months Eleanor had spoken in her defense, even if indirectly. Marcus noticed this, and his anger multiplied. "Shut up," he ordered his wife, but Carmen stepped between them. "No," she said simply. "No what?" Marcus asked, incredulous. "I won't let you speak to her like that in front of me." Carmen's audacity left Marcus momentarily speechless. In his 52 years of life, no one had ever interposed themselves between him and what he considered his property, including his wife. "You've completely lost your mind," he finally managed to say. "Perhaps," Carmen admitted, "but at least I can sleep at night." At that moment, Marcus made a decision that would change everything. Instead of simply firing Carmen, he decided she needed to learn a lesson that would be etched in her memory. A lesson that would serve as an example for any other employee who dared to challenge him. "All right," he said, forcing a cruel smile. "You want to be a hero? Let's see how far your courage takes you." Marcus left the room with heavy steps, leaving Carmen and Eleanor alone. The silence that followed was charged with tension and possibilities. Eleanor looked at the woman who had just risked her job for a stranger, unable to understand such a gesture of kindness. "Why did you do that?" Eleanor asked, her voice still trembling. "You don't even know me." Carmen sat on the edge of the bed beside her. "When I was your age, I went through the same thing. No one helped me. I swore that if I ever had the chance to help another woman, I wouldn't hesitate. He'll fire you. Worse, he'll make sure you never get work again." "That's my problem," Carmen said softly. "Are you hurt? Is the baby okay?" Eleanor instinctively placed her hands on her belly. "I think so. He never hits directly on the belly, just..." Her voice trailed off. "Just the rest of your body," Carmen completed, knowing the pattern well. "How long has he been doing this?" "Since we got married, 2 years. Eleanor lowered her eyes. "My family said I was lucky, a rich, powerful man. They don't know any of this." "What if they did?" Eleanor laughed bitterly. "My father owes him a lot of money. If I leave this marriage, Marcus will collect everything. My family would be out on the street." Carmen nodded, understanding the complexity of the situation. It wasn't just fear that kept Eleanor a prisoner. It was an entire system of dependencies and threats. Do you have anywhere to go? Somewhere he can't find you? Why? He'd always find me. And my family? Eleanor shook her head. It's impossible. Downstairs, Marcus was on the phone in his study talking to Robert Hayes, the head of the private security firm he used for special problems. I need you to investigate a woman, he said. Carmen Rivera works for Pristine Cleaners. I want to know everything about her, where she lives, who she lives with, where her children go to school, how much she owes, everything. Understood, Mr. Steele. How much time do I have? By tomorrow morning. And Robert, make sure you find something I can use. Marcus smiled coldly. He had learned long ago that everyone had a weakness. Everyone had something to lose. And when he found out what Carmen's was, she would learn the price of defying him. Meanwhile, Carmen had returned to her work, but now with a different purpose. She subtly observed the house's routine, noted where the security cameras were, and identified which employees might be potential allies. During lunch, she approached Mary, one of the other housekeepers who had worked in the house for 3 years. Is it always like this? Carmen asked casually as they organized cleaning supplies. Mary lowered her voice and looked around nervously. Worse. You haven't seen anything yet. The last employee who tried to intervene. Well, let's just say she left here, and the next day she was being evicted from her home. Coincidence, right? And you never thought of calling the police? Mary laughed without humor. The police? You know who his friends are. Half the city's precinct captains dine at his table every month. The other half owes him favors. Carmen absorbed the information. She knew she was dealing with more than just an abusive husband. She was facing a network of power and corruption that protected Marcus from any consequences. That afternoon, as she was cleaning the entrance hall, she noticed Eleanor slowly descending the stairs. The young woman seemed to have cried more, and there was a new bruise on her arm. He hurt you again? Carmen asked when she made sure they were alone. Eleanor just nodded, unable to speak. Listen, Carmen said urgently. I know it seems impossible now, but there has to be a way. There's always a way. You don't understand, Eleanor whispered. He said, if I try to leave him, he'll find me. And when he finds me... Eleanor couldn't finish the sentence, but Carmen understood the implied threat. She had seen enough similar cases to know that men like Marcus rarely made empty threats. They had resources, connections, and a sick need for control that drove them to dangerous extremes. He's right about one thing, Carmen said calmly. If you try to run away the conventional way, he'll probably find you. Eleanor looked at her with an expression of despair. So there's no way out? I said he'd find you if you ran away the conventional way. I didn't say there weren't other ways. Before Eleanor could ask what she meant, they heard heavy footsteps coming from upstairs. Marcus was descending. Eleanor quickly moved away from Carmen, pretending to check the plants in the entryway. Carmen, Marcus's voice echoed through the hall. I need to speak with you. She turned to face him, once again showing no sign of intimidation. Yes, sir. Come to my study, now. Carmen followed Marcus to his study, an environment that exuded power and intimidation. The walls were lined with diplomas, awards, and photos of him with politicians and celebrities. His desk was the size of a twin bed, strategically positioned so that anyone sitting opposite him would feel diminished. Sit down, he ordered, pointing to a low chair in front of the desk. Carmen remained standing. I prefer to stand, thank you. Marcus forced a smile. Fine. I've received some interesting information about you. He opened a folder on the desk and began to read. Carmen Rivera, 45 years old, lives at 245 Blossom Lane, apartment 3B, in the Hopewell neighborhood. Single mother of 2 children, Daniel, 17, a high school student at Liberty High School, and Sophia, 14, Same school. Has worked as a housekeeper for 15 years, supporting her family alone. Carmen maintained her neutral expression, but internally her heart pounded. He was sending a clear message. I know where to find you and your children. Marcus continued, enjoying what he believed was his psychological advantage. Daniel has a soccer scholarship to college next year. It would be a shame if something compromised that opportunity, wouldn't it? What exactly are you trying to say? Carmen asked, her voice still controlled. I'm saying you made a mistake yesterday. A mistake that can be forgiven as long as you understand your place. Marcus stood up and walked until he was very close to her. You will continue to work here. You will do your job quietly, and you will forget everything you saw or heard. In return, your children remain safe and their opportunities intact. It was Marcus's classic strategy. Identify what the person values most and use it as leverage. It worked with almost everyone. Almost. Carmen looked directly into his eyes. What if I don't accept? Then Daniel loses his scholarship. I can guarantee that with a simple phone call. Sophia might have some problems at school, and you, well, you'll find out how hard it is to find work when no one wants to hire you. The silence stretched for long seconds. Marcus expected to finally see fear appear in Carmen's eyes. He expected to see her bend like all the others did when he showed his true power. Instead, Carmen took a step closer to him. Mr. Marcus, she said, her voice low but clear. My children know me well. They know the kind of woman I am. If I go home today and tell them I witnessed a pregnant woman being assaulted and did nothing, they would be ashamed of me. And you know what? I would be ashamed of myself, too. Marcus blinked, confused. You're choosing a stranger over your own children? I'm choosing to be the kind of person I want my children to be. And if that means we're going to lose some opportunities, then we'll face it together. Carmen's answer genuinely perplexed Marcus. In his experience, everyone had a price. Everyone could be bought or intimidated. The idea that someone would choose moral principles over material security was something he simply couldn't comprehend. You're bluffing, he said, trying to regain control of the situation. No one sacrifices their own children's future for a stranger. Then you don't know the right kind of people, Carmen replied. My children were raised to understand that doing the right thing sometimes costs a lot, but doing the wrong thing always costs more. Marcus felt something he hadn't experienced in years: uncertainty. His usual strategy was failing, and he didn't have a plan B prepared to deal with someone who genuinely wasn't intimidated by his threats. All right, he said, changing tactics. Let's see if you maintain that brave attitude when the consequences start to appear. Carmen nodded calmly. I'll be here tomorrow for work, Mr. Marcus, unless you prefer to fire me now. No, Marcus said with a cruel smile. I want you here. I want you to see what happens to people who think they can challenge me. When Carmen left the study, she found Eleanor waiting nervously in the corridor. It was obvious she had tried to listen to the conversation, but the thick walls prevented her from hearing details. What did he say? Eleanor asked anxiously. Nothing I didn't expect, Carmen replied. He tried to scare me. It didn't work. You don't understand, Eleanor said, grabbing Carmen's arm. He doesn't just make threats. He follows through. The last employee who crossed him. She lost her home, her job, everything. Her children had to change schools because of disciplinary problems that appeared out of nowhere. Carmen could see the genuine fear in Eleanor's eyes. That's precisely why I can't back down now. If I show fear, he'll know he won, and then no one will ever have the courage to help you. That night, Carmen arrived home at the small but cozy apartment she shared with her children. Daniel was at the kitchen table doing homework, while Sophia watched television in the living room. How was work today, Mom? Sophia asked when Carmen entered. Interesting, Carmen replied, taking off her uniform. I need to talk to both of you. Daniel looked up from his books, noticing the serious tone in his mother's voice. Sophia turned off the television and joined them in the kitchen. Did something happen? Daniel asked. Carmen sat at the table with them. She had always been honest with her children about life's difficulties, but had also always protected them from the harsher details. This time, however, she felt they needed to know. My new boss is a very powerful man, but also very cruel. Today, I saw him hurting his pregnant wife, and I intervened. Sophia's eyes widened. Are you okay? I'm fine. But he didn't like what I did at all. He said he could cause problems for both of you if I didn't keep quiet. Daniel, always the more practical of the two, frowned. What kind of problems? He could interfere with your scholarship. He could cause trouble at your school. He could even make me lose other jobs. The silence in the small kitchen was heavy. Carmen watched her children's faces, looking for signs of fear or resentment. Instead, she saw something that filled her with pride. Mom, Sophia said finally, you did the right thing. Even if it means we'll have problems, Carmen asked. Especially if it means that, Daniel replied. You always taught us that it's no use having good things if you had to do bad things to get them. Carmen felt her eyes well up. Are you sure? Because if I continue with this, things could get difficult for us. Things are already difficult, Sophia said with surprising maturity for her 14 years. The difference is that now we'll have difficulties knowing that you're helping someone who needs it. Daniel agreed. And if this guy is so powerful, other people must be afraid of him too. Someone needs to stand up to him. The next day, Carmen arrived at work knowing that Marcus had probably already put his plan in motion. She was prepared for the consequences, but that didn't make the situation any less tense. Upon entering the mansion, she noticed that the atmosphere was different, quieter, more charged. Mary, the other housekeeper, avoided eye contact with her throughout the morning. It was obvious she had received instructions not to talk to Carmen. The other employees also kept their distance, as if she were radioactive. Around 10 in the morning, Eleanor appeared in the kitchen where Carmen was cleaning. There were new bruises on her arms, only partially hidden by her blouse sleeves. He's furious, Eleanor whispered. He spent all night making calls and planning ways to harm you. I imagined, Carmen replied, continuing her work. Did he say anything specific? He said you'd learn what happens to people who don't know their place. Eleanor hesitated before continuing. Carmen, please apologize to him. Tell him you understood the mistake you made. There's still time for you to back down. Carmen stopped cleaning and looked at Eleanor. And then, what happens to you when I'm no longer here? That's not your problem. It became my problem the moment I saw him hurting you. Eleanor began to cry silently. You don't understand. I'm already lost, but you can still save your family. My family is already saved, Carmen said softly, because they have a mother who isn't afraid to do what's right. At that moment, Marcus entered the kitchen. His smile was cruel and satisfied, like someone who had just received good news. Carmen, I need to give you some information, he said, feigning sadness. I received a call from the college where your son received his soccer scholarship. Unfortunately, they discovered some irregularities in the documentation. The scholarship has been cancelled. Carmen felt as if she had been punched in the stomach, but she kept her expression controlled. Daniel had worked years to get that scholarship. It was his dream, his chance at a better future. What kind of irregularities? She asked, her voice calm. Oh, bureaucratic issues. You know how strict these institutions are. Marcus was clearly enjoying the moment. But perhaps, if you reconsidered your attitude here at home, I could make some calls. I have friends at the college. Eleanor looked from one to the other, seeing the poorly disguised pain on Carmen's face. She knew what it meant for a family like hers to lose an opportunity like that. "Mum?" A young voice echoed from the entrance hall. Everyone turned, surprised. Daniel was at the kitchen door, still wearing his school uniform. He had left early specifically to find his mother. "Daniel?" Carmen asked, confused. "What are you doing here?" "The college called me," he said, entering the kitchen. His gaze went straight to Marcus. "They said my scholarship was cancelled because of irregularities, but when I asked what irregularities, they couldn't explain it properly. They said they received a call from someone important, questioning my eligibility." Marcus smiled with satisfaction. "Well, these things happen." Daniel turned to his mother. "Mum, does this have to do with the situation you told me about yesterday?" Carmen hesitated, not wanting to involve her son directly in the conflict. But Daniel was smart and had already connected the dots. "You must be the man who hits his own wife," Daniel said, looking directly at Marcus. The smile vanished from Marcus's face. "How dare you?" "How dare I speak the truth?" Daniel interrupted. "My mum taught me that the truth is the only thing that truly matters." Daniel's presence in the kitchen completely changed the dynamic of the situation. Marcus was used to intimidating vulnerable employees, but facing a determined and articulate teenager was something different. The boy had his mother's serenity, but also the reckless courage of youth. "You have no authority to be here," Marcus said, trying to regain control. "This is private property." "And this is a conversation about my future," Daniel replied. "I think I have the right to participate." Carmen stepped between her son and Marcus. "Daniel, you should go home." "I'm not going to let you face this alone, Mom." Daniel looked back at Marcus. "Sir, you may have the power to cancel my scholarship. You may have money to buy people, but you cannot buy my respect. And you definitely cannot buy my family's silence. You impertinent brat." Marcus took a step towards Daniel, but Carmen interposed herself. "No," she said firmly, "if you want to intimidate someone, intimidate me. Leave my son out of this." Eleanor, who had remained silent throughout the exchange, suddenly spoke. "Stop." Everyone turned to her. There was something different in her voice, a firmness that hadn't been there in a long time. "Marcus, stop this," she repeated louder this time. "Shut up," Marcus ordered automatically, but Eleanor didn't obey. "I won't shut up anymore." She approached Carmen and Daniel. "You're doing this for me, and I can't let you suffer the consequences alone." "Eleanor, go back to your room," Marcus said, his voice laden with threat. "No." The word came out of her like a war cry. "I won't hide anymore. I won't pretend this is normal anymore." Daniel looked at Eleanor, seeing the marks on her arms, the poorly disguised fear in her eyes, but also a spark of growing determination. "Ma'am," he said softly, "you're pregnant. You shouldn't be going through this." "I shouldn't," Eleanor agreed, placing her hands protectively over her belly. "My baby shouldn't grow up in a house where violence is normal." Marcus was rapidly losing control of the situation. His individual intimidation strategy was turning into a collective rebellion. "All of you are making a terrible mistake," he said, his voice low and dangerous. "You have no idea what I'm capable of." "I do have an idea," Carmen said. "You're capable of hitting a pregnant woman. You're capable of using your money to harm innocent children. You're capable of buying people's silence through fear. And you're also capable of destroying your lives," Marcus retorted. "Perhaps," Daniel interjected, "but you're just one man, and all the people you bought or intimidated into doing your bidding, they're people like my mom, people who have families, consciences, limits." Eleanor stepped forward. "He's right. Marcus, you always told me no one would help me because everyone is afraid of you, but they're here, risking everything for a stranger. And you know why?" Carmen continued, "because there are things more important than money or fear, like dignity, compassion, doing what's right." Marcus looked around the kitchen, seeing 3 people who refused to be intimidated by him. It was a completely new and disconcerting experience. Throughout his life, he had used power and fear to control situations. Now, for the first time, he faced people who valued something more than their own safety. "You'll regret this," he said, but his voice had lost some of its usual authority. "Perhaps," Carmen said, "but at least we'll regret doing the right thing, not doing the wrong thing." At that moment, as if the universe wanted to further test the group's resolve, Marcus's phone rang. He answered angrily, expecting another call related to his business. Instead, he heard a voice that made his blood run cold. "Marcus Steele?" The voice on the other end of the line was formal and authoritative. "Yes. Who is this?" Marcus replied, stepping a few paces away from the group in the kitchen. "Detective Sandra Miller from the Special Victims Unit. We've received an anonymous report of domestic violence at your residence. We are on our way for a routine check." Marcus felt the ground move beneath his feet. "This is absurd. Who made this report?" "As I said, it was anonymous. We'll be there in 15 minutes. The call ended abruptly. Marcus looked at his phone as if it had betrayed him, then turned to the group in the kitchen, his eyes fixed on Carmen. "It was you," he said, his voice full of accusation. "It wasn't," Carmen replied honestly. "I didn't have the time or opportunity." "Then who?" Marcus stopped mid-sentence, a terrible realization forming in his mind. He had so many enemies, so many people he had intimidated and humiliated over the years. Any of his previous employees, any of the neighbors, anyone who had witnessed his excesses could have made the call. Eleanor approached him, and for the first time in months, there was no fear in her eyes. "It doesn't matter who it was. What matters is that someone will finally hear the truth." "The truth?" Marcus laughed bitterly. "You think anyone will believe the word of an employee and a hysterical wife against mine?" "They'll believe these," Eleanor said, raising her blouse sleeves to show the bruises. "And these," she continued, pointing to the marks on her face. "And the medical history I've kept for 2 years." Marcus looked at his wife as if seeing her for the first time. "What medical history?" "Every time you hurt me, I went to the hospital. I always invented an excuse. Stairs, domestic accidents, sports. But the doctors photographed everything, documented everything. I told them it was for precaution, in case I needed the history for insurance." The color had drained from Marcus's face. "You wouldn't dare." "I wouldn't dare what? Tell the truth." Eleanor was transformed, as if years of fear were being released all at once. "You always said I was weak, that I would never have the courage to do anything. Maybe you were right, but now I'm not alone." Daniel looked at Eleanor with admiration. "Ma'am, that was very clever." "I didn't plan it as a strategy," Eleanor explained. "I planned it as evidence, in case something worse happened to me." Carmen immediately understood the implication. "You were documenting everything in case he killed me," Eleanor completed. "I wanted to make sure there would be enough evidence for him not to get away with it." The silence in the kitchen was heavy. Marcus was processing the realization that his wife, the woman he considered completely controlled, had been preparing her own protection for years. "You don't know who you're messing with," he said, but his voice had lost all authority. "I have friends in the police, judges in my pocket." "Had," Carmen corrected. "You had those things when no one was paying attention, but now you'll have to explain medical evidence, photographs, documentation. You'll have to explain why your pregnant wife has bruises all over her body. And you'll have to explain why you cancelled an innocent boy's scholarship as retaliation," Daniel added. Eleanor approached Marcus, and for the first time in years, she looked directly into his eyes without fear. "Marcus," she said softly, "you always told me I would never be brave enough to leave you. That I would never be strong enough to survive without you, that no one would help me because everyone is afraid of your power. She paused, placing her hand on her belly. But you were wrong. I am braver than I thought. And there are people willing to risk everything to do what's right. Outside, they could hear the sound of cars approaching. The sound of approaching sirens echoed through the mansion, breaking the tense silence in the kitchen. Marcus looked out the window and saw 2 police cruisers passing through the gate. His mind was racing, trying to formulate a strategy to deal with the situation. Listen, he said quickly, there's still time for us to resolve this among ourselves. Eleanor, you know I care about you. Sometimes I lose my temper, but it's only because I care so much. Stop, Eleanor interrupted. It won't work this time. The doorbell rang, and they could hear the authoritative voice of a police officer outside. Police department, open up, please. Marcus took a deep breath, trying to regain his usual composure. Remember, you still work for me, he said to Carmen and Daniel. And you, he looked at Eleanor, are still my wife. Carmen stepped forward. No, we don't work for you, sir. We work to support ourselves, and she is not your property. She is a person. Marcus went to open the door, forcing his best business smile. Outside were 2 police officers, an older one with graying hair and an experienced gaze, and a younger one carrying a tablet for notes. Good afternoon, said the older officer. I'm Detective Sandra Miller, and this is Detective Paula Green. May we come in? Of course, Marcus said, opening the door. But I must say I'm confused about this visit. There's been no problem here. The officers entered and immediately noticed the group in the kitchen. Sandra Miller had 20 years of experience investigating domestic violence cases and could read a situation in seconds. The tension in the air was palpable. We'd like to speak with Ms. Eleanor Steele, Sandra said. Eleanor approached, her hands trembling slightly. That's me. Sandra discreetly observed the bruises on Eleanor's arms, the marks on her face partially hidden by makeup. She had seen those signs hundreds of times before. Miss Eleanor, could we speak privately? Anything you want to know, you can ask right here, Marcus interjected. We have no secrets. Actually, Sandra said firmly, it's protocol to speak with the alleged victim in private. Miss Eleanor? Eleanor looked at Carmen, who gave her an encouraging nod. Yes, I'd like to speak privately. Use my study, Marcus offered quickly. We prefer a neutral environment, Paula said. How about the living room? As the officers headed with Eleanor to the living room, Marcus tried to follow, but Sandra stopped him. Mr. Steele, you need to wait here. Left alone with Carmen and Daniel, Marcus finally exploded. You've destroyed my life. I hope you're happy. We didn't destroy anything, Carmen replied calmly. We just stopped pretending we didn't see what was happening. In the living room, Eleanor was telling the officers everything. She showed the bruises, explained the pattern of assaults, spoke about the constant fear and isolation. Paula meticulously took notes. Miss Eleanor, Sandra said softly, do you have anywhere to go? Family, your friends. My family is financially dependent on him, but... Eleanor hesitated. I have an aunt in a different state. She always said she'd help me if I needed it. And do you have the medical documents you mentioned? I have copies stored in a safety deposit box at the bank and some photographs on my phone. Sandra nodded. There was enough evidence for at least a restraining order, possibly for an arrest. Ms. Eleanor, we'll need you to come with us to file an official report, and we'll arrange a restraining order immediately. When they returned to the kitchen, Marcus tried once again to control the narrative. Officers, I think there's a misunderstanding here. My wife is going through a difficult time with the pregnancy. Sometimes she has emotional outbursts. Mr. Steele, Sandra interrupted him, you have the right to remain silent. Anything you say can and will be used against you. 3 months later, Carmen was in her own kitchen, preparing breakfast for her children. Life had changed drastically since that day at the Steel Mansion, but in ways she never could have imagined. Daniel entered the kitchen wearing his new college uniform. After Marcus's story came to light, revealing his intimidation tactics and corruption, several of his connections quickly distanced themselves. The college not only reinstated Daniel's scholarship, but also opened an investigation into how it had been cancelled in the first place. "Mom, did you see the newspaper today?" Sophia asked, coming in with the tablet in her hands. Carmen smiled. "What's in the paper?" "An article about Eleanor. She prevailed in court." Carmen took the tablet and read the headline, "Billionaire's ex-wife wins landmark domestic violence case." The article explained how Eleanor had used the medical documentation she collected over 2 years to build a solid case against Marcus. He had been convicted not only of assault, but also of making threats and using his influence to intimidate witnesses. "Is she doing okay?" Daniel asked. "More than okay," Carmen replied. "She moved to her aunt's state, had the baby, a beautiful baby girl named Hope, and she's studying law now." "Law?" Sophia asked, surprised. "She said she wants to help other women who are going through the same situation she went through." At that moment, Carmen's phone rang. It was Eleanor. "Carmen, how are you?" "Hi, Eleanor. We were just talking about you. Congratulations on the judgment." "Thank you, but I didn't call to talk about that. I called because I have a proposition for you." Carmen was curious. "What kind of proposition?" "Well, you know I'm studying law, right? And I met some people here who work with domestic violence victim advocacy organizations. They're looking for someone to coordinate a support program, someone who truly understands what these women go through." "I don't have a background in social work," Carmen said hesitantly, "but you have something more important. You have courage, compassion, and you know how to see through fear to do the right thing. They offer training, and the salary is double what you earn as a housekeeper." Carmen felt her eyes fill with tears. "Eleanor, I don't know what to say." "Say you'll think about it. You changed my life, Carmen. Let me return the favor." After hanging up the phone, Carmen looked at her children, who had listened to the conversation. "Are you going to accept, Mom?" Daniel asked. "I think so," Carmen replied. "It seems everything we went through had a purpose." Sophia approached and hugged her mother. "I'm proud of you, Mom. Even when we thought everything was going wrong, you didn't give up on doing what was right." "Sometimes," Carmen said, looking out the window at the rising sun, "doing the right thing feels impossible. It feels like you're alone against the whole world. But the truth is, there are always people willing to help, even if you don't know it yet." Daniel smiled. "And sometimes you discover you're stronger than you imagined." "And that doing the right thing isn't about not being afraid," Sophia added. "It's about doing what needs to be done, even when you are afraid." Carmen hugged her 2 children, reflecting on the journey that brought them there. Marcus was serving his sentence, Eleanor was rebuilding her life, and she had discovered a new vocation that could help other families. "You know what?" she said to her children. "In the end, we found out that when you stand up for one person, you're standing up for all people. And when you choose to do what's right, you inspire others to do the same." Outside, the day was beginning, full of possibilities and hope. And for the first time in a long time, Carmen felt that the world was a place where kindness could win, where courage mattered, and where even a simple cleaner could make a difference. If this story touched your heart, hit the like button so I know you appreciate stories about courage and justice. And tell me in the comments, have you ever witnessed a situation where you had to choose between your safety and doing what was right? How did you react?